Alright, so today we're going to look at how to solder some things. Now, we're going to look at these little guide sheet to start with, and then we're going to move on to doing some little test solders using just a little bit of perf board and some pins. Okay, just solder these onto here basically. And then we're going to move on to actually soldering up a little project. So first things we need to remember, okay, before we even look at these how to solder things, is soldering irons are hot. Okay, I've got my soldering iron here. Oh, just turned off. So 200, 300 degrees. Okay, when it's sitting at about 300 degrees most of the time. If you touch the hot part of the soldering iron, which is the end here, okay, you will get burnt. Okay, pretty straightforward. So any of this metal, okay, gets progressively hotter till you get to the end. Any of that, touch it, you'll get burnt. The really hot part is the very end. Okay, so, as you can see up here, if you've got a pointy tip, okay, which most of the ones at our school don't, we have a cut-off tip like this one. Okay, pointy tip, you want to use the edges of it, not the point. Cut-off tip, you actually want to use the flat part. Okay, so our cut-off tips look like this. Okay, we want to use this part, not this part. Okay, none of this back here. We want to use that pointy part right in there. Okay, so of our tip, that's not very clear. Okay, in here is what we want to use. So before we do that, we need to make sure our tip is clean, okay, which we're basically starting down the last step here. Okay, using a sponge to clean your iron whenever black oxidization builds up on the tip. That oxidization is all the black stuff you can see on the end of my tip there. Okay, your soldering irons have a little sponge, okay, sitting in the soldering stand. I do not, because I forgot to get it. Okay, so I've just got a bit of cloth here. Okay. Obviously, I'm not going to hold this with my hands. You see all this steam come off? It's just the water boiling. That's okay. Ideally, you'll have a little bit of brass wool. Brass wool is like orangey coloured part of your stand as well. You can use that to scrub off the dirty oxidization if you need to. Alright, sometimes we need to use a little bit of solder, there we go, to help clean off that oxidization. So now we're starting to get a nice shiny bit on the end. That's what we want to see. Now, when we're doing this, we have two things: our soldering iron. The other really important part I've just put down and lost, which is pretty impressive considering I haven't went anywhere. The other important part is our solder. Okay, our solder, sometimes it has lead in it, sometimes it does not. Lead stuff is better in that it's easier to work with. Lead stuff is bad in that it's got lead in it, which is a heavy metal, builds up in your body, and cause all sorts of issues. Make you go crazy, stop you having babies. The lead isn't going to go into smoke or anything to affect you. The lead-free ones aren't going to get into smoke and affect you. What's in the smoke is the flux, okay, a cleaning liquid that's inside the solder. Okay, so it's in this metal. It turns into smoke. That smoke is bad for you. Don't breathe it in. You don't need your head really up close. Just head back at a distance so you can see. If not, you need a magnifying glass or some glasses. Putting your head closer is not a good idea. Now, we're just going to use our little header pins here. Now, I'm only using this perf board to help hold on to everything. You want to use either have a friend to help hold. If you're using a motor, they can hold the motor. Be nice to them, don't burn them, they'll be upset. Or some sticky tape. Sticky tape works great, particularly masking tape. Okay, normal sticky tape made out of plastic has a tendency to melt. When we solder, we want to touch the iron to the component leg and the metal ring at the same time. So just like down here, you want to be touching, you want all those three things touching. Okay, so iron, the thing you're soldering, and the thing you're soldering it to. It's a wire and a piece of metal. Okay, wire touching the piece of metal with the iron touching it. Then we add in our solder. So all those things keep in contact. Add our solder. Solder is not like hot glue. We don't get a bunch on the end of our iron and then try and blob it onto things. It won't stick. Or it'll sit there and then it'll break off easily. Okay. This whole process here takes about 1 to 2 seconds. So what we should end up with is this little volcano looking thing. Okay. Nice curve going upwards, joining two. Shouldn't have a blob where it's only stuck to one. Shouldn't all fall down. Shouldn't all be stuck on one side. Shouldn't have heaps of solder. Okay, just enough to get this happening. Not so much you've got multiple things joining up. Sounds like a lot of things, but you'll get the hang of it pretty fast. So I've got my iron here. I am resting it, so it's touching all three things. Getting my solder, adding it to that junction. Okay. It's flowed, take my iron off. We've got our nice little solder joint. If the camera will focus, which it won't, you'll be able to see a nice solder joint. Come on, camera. Okay, nice solder joint. It's a bit of a blob, which means it's touching the pad and the pin, which is exactly what we want. So one more time, I'll come in a bit closer now. So got our soldering iron. Just gotta let it quickly heat back up again. I only had to let this heat up because it turned off. Yours should not get that cold. If you hear someone telling you you need to wet your tip, that does not mean put it in water or put it on the sponge. That means put a little bit of solder on the tip before you go. The tip shouldn't be dry, as in it shouldn't have no solder on it. Okay, so a dry tip would look like this. Oh, just go clean my tip off so I can show you what it would look like. Okay, a dry tip looks like this, really sharp, shiny. Okay, there's still a bit of solder on there. So when we say we want to wet our tip, we mean get our solder and just put a little bit on, just like that. It makes it easier to get good contact between our pin and our board. Being a bit tricky here, I'm going to turn this up the other way. Okay. When we're soldering things in a row, we don't want to touch ones we've already done. So you'll normally start one side and work your way across. So we got all three, adding a bit of solder, trying to get it to touch where all three things are meeting. Set my soldering iron turned off. So heating up, all three things touching, add our solder, you see it flows, let it heat up a bit, pull our iron away. Okay, so we get a nice little blob touching all three. Now, these aren't perfect. I am not perfect at this. Okay, these are not perfect. You can see the one on the right probably has a bit too much solder. Okay, probably has a bit too much. One after that isn't too bad. This one, not too bad. Main thing is you can see it's taking up the whole width. It's wide at the bottom. Okay, it gets pointier towards the top. That means it's stuck to the pad. Okay, a bit of metal on the PCB, this circuit board, and it's stuck to the pin, a bit of metal sticking up there. Okay, once you're done with your soldering iron, make sure you turn it off. You don't want them sitting around at 300 degrees. Okay, that's how you get all that black oxidization. So turn it off, put it in the stand so you can't touch it, and you're done. This will be cool to touch, okay, after a few minutes. depending on how much metal there was. So that's how we solder.